Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Credit Chat. I'm Rod Griffin, Director of Consumer Education and Advocacy for Experian, here to answer your questions about credit reporting, credit scoring, fraud and ID theft, all of those things that are important to you in protecting and managing your finances and that can affect your life every day. So I want to help you answer your questions. Sissy AKJ, thanks for joining and being part of the chat today. Mark Holder 27, I think, SL667, Shoney 628, thanks for being part of the chat. Wearing my flannel shirt today. The Texas weather is being Texas weather. It was 80 degrees Sunday and sunny, and today it's dropping from about 60 this morning to below freezing and snow and ice tonight, they're telling us. So welcome to Texas if you're in Texas. Dave Smith 08, thanks for joining. Tell Carey, thanks for being hey Shoney 628. Good to see you here. If you have questions, please feel free to ask. I'll do my very best to answer. This is all about helping you get the information you need to be more successful and more financially healthy, to be able to make good credit decisions, access to financial services you need. So please feel free to ask. Don't be shy. If you have a question, others have the same questions. I'm sure it's from experience. I've been doing this for almost 23 years now, talking to people about credit reports and credit scores, and I still learn things, and I know everybody has questions and things that they need answered. So that's what it's all about. Juicy Spirits, good to see you again. Can you tell us about those new score changes that have been circulated on the blog sites? Okay. Thank you so much. I'm glad. I mean, that's the whole idea. It's about having a dialogue. So the new scores, we don't know a whole lot yet. Now, you're referencing FICO 10. FICO is a scoring company, probably the best known scoring company or most recognized name in the industry. They announced their newest scoring system, and periodically scoring companies update their scores, their formulas, algorithms to reflect changes in the marketplace, in the way consumers are using credit, to help make sure that they're still predicting risk accurately. So this is a normal sort of process. They are right now the most commonly used FICO score is FICO 8. FICO 9 is on the market. It usually takes time for the new scores to be adopted, what we call adopted by lenders, to begin to be used by lenders who are going to test the system, make sure it still works for them, make sure that the changes make sense, make sure it's going to be as predictive or more predictive in terms of risk and ability to make loans and financial transactions. So that usually takes some time, a year or two, in some cases maybe more, before you see it widely accepted. So I don't think we're going to see the FICO 10 scores broadly used right away. It will take some time. They'll get there. So that's kind of the first thing. They are still going to operate very similarly to scores in the past. People are saying, there could be big changes in your scores. Your scores might go up, they might go down. That's true a little bit depending on where you are. If your scores are kind of in the middle of the range, you're probably not going to see much change. If you have really good scores, they might go up a bit. They might stay about the same. If you have really poor scores, they might go down a bit or stay about the same. But you're not going to see, in my experience, when I see score updates, you don't see huge swings in scores because that would be kind of unnerving. It wouldn't make much sense. So the old scores are very predictive, very accurate. The newest scores help make that a little more accurate depending on changes in the way we use credit in our economy and where we are. And so FICO 10 and FICO 10T, that's the big change, are going to be similar, still have the same scale. The biggest difference will be in FICO 10T, which T stands for trended. So trended data. FICO 10T is going to look at not only a snapshot of your credit report at a moment in time, but it's also going to look at how you use credit across time. So over, I think it's a 24-month period. We don't know, like I said, I don't have all of the information yet, but it's 24-month period, maybe longer, maybe a little shorter, I'm not sure. But over a period of months or a couple of years, and it will give insight into how a person is using credit over time. Are they increasing their balances? Are they decreasing balances over time? Do they have credit cycles potentially that go up and down? So even though they may be a little behind now or have higher debts now, over time they'll pay them down because they have, for example, a seasonal job kind of career. And so it might give better insight into how to approve credit. It might actually qualify more people. We don't know yet, but I think some of that is the case. So trended data looks at how you use credit over time, which gives better insight into what's happening with a person and their credit. So their debts are getting further and further behind. Probably not a good sign. If they have been behind but they're catching up, that could be a good sign and could help you qualify. So it's going to operate a bit differently, but kind of the newest development in credit scoring systems. Experian actually had scores that have done that as well that are available, and so we find that they're actually more predictive and actually helpful to people on the whole. If you are affected, I think my perspective, my experience is that it would be people who are on the fringes. So if your scores are marginal, they might go down a little bit because of the changes in the scores that could affect you. They might go up a little bit depending on where you are, what you're doing. So it's really hard to say in that regard. But that's the news. It's their newest algorithm will be in testing and be adopted. Generally, we see those happen over time. It's just sort of a natural and reasonable process. So they're updating and looking at how are people using credit, how do they predict risk, or what indicates risk, does that change, and then they adjust their scoring systems and utilize new technologies, potentially new data sources with new scores that are available to help better predict risk and actually usually benefits people on the whole to qualify. So I think it'll be a positive thing. Kind of my perspective at this point. Over time, we'll see where that goes, but it'll be a while before they get in. And it will weigh a bit of information a bit differently. Whoops, let me scroll back down. I'll try to catch up on the questions. Okay, credit repair. Hey, good to see you. Don't like the new scoring system. Random image. The good news is it will be a while before it's actually in wide use by lenders. So look at where you're using credit, using existing scoring systems. What will still be true is that they are still going to look at your payment history. Are you paying your bills on time? Are you late? Are your credit card balances high as compared to your credit limits? Those are still the utilization rate. It's still going to be the two most important factors in those scores. So if you're paying your bills on time, keeping your balances low, you're probably not going to see much impact. You're still going to have comparable scores. So keep doing those kinds of things. Ms. DD4, great to see you. 705 considered in the middle. So random image, that pretty close. You're actually above average a little bit for FICO scores as well as Vantage scores. FICO scores, if I remember right now, I'm catching up on my numbers, but the average FICO score I think is 704. So you'd be a little bit higher right at that average level. Vantage score, the average Vantage score 3.0 is 682. So they're similar, comparable. They both mean kind of the same thing. You're pretty close to the middle, which would make sense if you're an average score. So pretty close, but not bad. If you're over 700 on a FICO score, that's what we would consider, or lenders would consider prime, but probably low prime, which means you would likely qualify, but may not get the best terms and rates. So headed in the right direction. So yeah, pretty close to the middle and doing pretty well. Svelin SBA lens 123. I can't pronounce it properly, but I tried. Do hospital bills get taken off your credit report after 7 years, if at all? Yes. So hospital bills do not appear in a credit report until they become a collection account. So we don't report just regular hospital payments. They would have to be defaulted and become a collection account. We do not include that collection account for 6 months. So once it's become delinquent and gone to collections, we hold it for 6 months, and then it will appear in your credit report 7 years from the original delinquency date of that debt. So if it's a legitimate collection that you owe, it can be on your report for up to 7 years from the original delinquency date. There's some potential that could change. Again, we delay reporting to make sure it's actually not something like a billing error or an insurance dispute. We make sure it's a collection that should be there. Scoring systems also treat them differently, though. If you have a medical collection and it's paid, they will exclude that medical collection from the score. The older those medical collections are, the less effect they'll have on scores. And scoring systems and newest systems actually weigh them less heavily, so they have less effect on credit scores than they did in the past. So there's some positive, use that term loosely when it comes to medical collections, but relative to other kinds of debts, the positives are that they don't weigh as heavily and can be less impactful on your scores. Does a credit report affect a lot when 1 to 2 times pulled over a few days or a week period? N3 WKB, it depends. So if you, which is the answer to every credit reporting question out there, actually, but it depends on what those inquiries are for and the scoring system used. If you're applying for an auto loan or a mortgage loan, for example, they recognize that you're going to shop for the best rates. You're probably going to buy one car or one house, and the scoring systems will see those inquiries. We will list them on the credit report because we're required to have a full record of who's accessed that report. But the scoring systems will recognize that they are for auto loans or mortgage loans, and they will only count them as one inquiry, or they won't count them at all with the newest system. So you don't have to worry about shopping for the best terms and rates. Other kinds of scores, Vantage scores, the newest scores, do the same thing for other kinds of applications as well, so inquiries. So those are what we call hard inquiries if you've applied. Soft inquiries you don't have to worry about. Those are things like getting your own credit report, insurance purposes, employment purposes, pre-approved credit offers, reviews by existing lenders. Those are shown only to you. They don't affect scores ever, so you don't have to worry about that. If you've pulled the reports within, typically, if you've shopped for a loan within 14 days, you're pretty safe. It's probably not going to have a big effect, if any, on your scores. Some of them actually go longer. Some of them go out to up to 45 days. But so my advice is always shop for those rates within 14 days. You'll be in good shape in that regard. They'll count them as one for auto loans and mortgage loans in particular, and in some cases other kinds of applications. Supposed to move after 7 years. Yes. And from the original delinquency date, so the date it became late. When we're talking about medical collections, they usually appear without association with a previous debt. So the collection comes on and it's 7 years from the original delinquency date of that debt. So it's just like any other collection account in terms of when it's deleted, 7 years from the original delinquency date of the debt itself. And with regular collections, non-medical, just to be clear, regular collection accounts have to report the original delinquency date from the original debt. So the original account and the collection come off at the same time. So just to keep that in mind. How long is one late payment on a report? 7 years from the date of that delinquency. So 7 years is a rule of thumb. If you miss a payment today, 7 years from this date roughly, it will come off the report. So it's 7 years from that date. If you become late, never catch up. If you're late 30 days and 60 and 90, it's charged off as a loss. The account goes to collections. 7 years from the date that account first became late and never was caught up again, or what we say never became current, will be deleted from that date. That's the original delinquency date. Most important date in the credit report for most people. Other dates don't affect that. So if your most recent payment date, most recent update date, all of those, most recent, there are lots of dates. The only one that affects when information is deleted, negative information, is that original delinquency date. So you can talk to your lender, you can make payments, all of those things. They're not going to affect when that account comes off the report or that late payment comes off the report. FICO 10 looks to see if you are taking out personal loans to pay your balances. It will look at personal loans. It won't necessarily see how they're being used to be paid. So they'll see personal loans on the report. They're saying that they'll weigh them more heavily. Part of that, I think, is that more and more people are using personal loans, which are unsecured debts, and sometimes called signature loans. And that growth in the use of those loans needs to be reflected in their scoring system because it's a change in consumer behavior. So it's looking at how millions of people use that kind of information, those kinds of financial tools, and what does that mean in terms of risk. So they're giving that more attention. But at the same time, if you use a personal loan, you pay off a credit card, and then don't bring the balances back up again, you're lowering your utilization rate. So likely will offset that personal loan effect. So it's about how much debt you carry, not just that you have them. And people use personal loans for lots of things, not just to pay off credit cards. So they're looking at personal loans, not necessarily to see if you're paying off your credit cards. That connection isn't really made in a credit report. You'll see the personal loan, its balance, your payments. You'll see a credit card and its payments and its balance. But it doesn't show this personal loan is used to pay off this credit card. And they could probably make that inference if the credit card balance went away in that amount, but the key is, as you say, is then are you bringing your balance back up? If you pay off the credit card balance, you reduce that utilization rate. That's going to help your credit scores and help you manage to pay those debts on time. So if you're paying that personal loan on time, that's going to be a positive in the long run because you're paying it well. So kind of the key there. Do you work on the business credit side as well? A little bit. So you know a bit about our business credit reporting system and services. Always open to questions. If I don't know the answer, I'll get one for you and make sure I get the right one for you. And happy to share. Does anyone utilize Credit Karma scores instead of FICO 8? So when you say Credit Karma, they're a competitor to Experian. They use a Vantage Score 3.0. I believe it's 3.0, so they're using not 4.0 yet. But Vantage Score 3.0, that's a legitimate real credit score. I actually did a Facebook Live, and you can see the video with Jeff Richardson, who is Vice President of their communications and marketing team at Vantage Score. A couple of weeks ago, and talked about credit scores in our state of credit survey. So Experian did a state of credit survey that we've done over every year for a decade now. And Jeff and I talked about the results of that survey and what it means in terms of Vantage Score, what it is. Vantage Score is a legitimate, real credit score. Billions of those scores are used by lenders every year. They're a competitor to FICO. And so it's a bit like saying Ford and General Motors. So it's just a different scoring system and a company that creates credit scores, and they're a competitor to FICO. People know FICO, and you say FICO, it's almost like saying Kleenex instead of tissue. So just a competitor is what that is. So yes, lots of lenders actually use Vantage Score as well. Had a medical collection just put on my report, but has been paid. Will that go away or 7 years? So what should happen is CCAKJ. The medical collection should be updated to show paid on your credit report. It will stay there for 7 years from the original delinquency date. It's hard to say today. The original delinquency date of the collection. So it shows that account history. However, scoring systems now from FICO and Vantage Score will recognize that it's paid, and they won't include it in the score calculation, so it shouldn't hurt your scores anymore. Your scores should go up as a result. So give it 30 days or so. It needs to be updated with us. Usually the lender reports that payment to us at the end of the billing cycle. So I always encourage you to give about 30 days, maybe 45, to make sure that there's time for the lender to update that status to us. Usually it's sooner than that, but that makes sure that you have time and that the information is updated in the report so that the next time a score is calculated, it should include it. But it should help. You'll still see it in the report because the report's a credit history, but the scoring systems recognize it's paid, and so isn't affecting your ability to repay other debts, and it will either, in most cases, exclude it today from the score calculation. I hate credit cards. My banker brother keeps telling me to get a couple to help build credit. So random image. I would agree with your brother. I have a banker brother too, oddly. But one or two is all you need. And what I always encourage people to do is realize that credit and debt aren't the same thing. You can have a credit card, not carry any debt, take advantage of the incentives it offers. So get a credit card, make a $10 or $20 or $30 purchase a month, turn around and pay it in full the next day. Go online to your credit card provider, make that payment. You're not carrying a balance. You're not taking on debt. Debt's the financial problem. Overusing credit cards is the financial problem. So if you can manage that temptation and not make those impulse buys, kind of key. But if you can do that, having one or two cards can be helpful in terms of credit scores, because when you use a credit card, you're given a credit limit, but you're not told how much you can use of that limit every month. So you make that decision. Do you charge to the maximum? Do you make a minimum purchase? Do you then pay the balance in full? Do you pay the minimum due? So there's free will in determining how you're using that account. That free will gives better insight into how you make independent borrowing and repayment decisions. So it indicates better the risk that you would represent in giving you a loan. So if you have one or two cards, it can help you actually build your scores a bit faster. You don't have to. There's no requirement in scores. Scores can still be very good if you don't have credit cards or revolving accounts. But that utilization rate calculation is the second most important factor. So having a credit card or two, you don't have to have 10 or 15 or 20. There's no magic number. Just one or two is sufficient. use those accounts periodically so there's activity, and then pay them in full. And you'll be able to take advantage of the benefits they bring. So maybe cash back, insurance, airline miles, discounts on purchases, and help build your scores a bit faster. So that's why so I would agree with your brother on that account, so long as you aren't tempted to use those cards to make impulse purchases and overspend. And I've said, and I'll say again, credit cards aren't for everybody, and so you have to understand your personality as well, and make sure that you can manage them well. If you can, having one or two is helpful. If you can't, and you'll get in trouble, and you yourself, and that you're tempted to do that, maybe it's not right for you. So you have to make those decisions too. Make sure that you're making decisions based on what is best for your financial situation overall. Don't let credit scores be the only factor. They should never be the only factor in financial decisions. They're an important piece of it when it comes to credit, because building credit can be helpful in accessing other financial tools and resources. You should use it as a financial tool, but one or two will do. So I kind of agree with your brother on that one. I've overextended my credit to where my score is too low to get a consolidation loan, and that's a challenge. I don't have the ability to help there. Talk to lenders. One piece of advice I would give is go to the nfcc.org, the National Foundation for Credit Counseling, and find a good credit counselor in your area. They're nonprofit member organizations around the country. They have very well-trained people who are very knowledgeable, can help look at your overall financial situation. They're neutral. They don't have any personal or emotional attachment. They're there to help you make good decisions. They can work with your lenders if they need to, if there's no other way to reduce those debts, and work with you on debt management plans and those sorts of things. So seek advice and help from a good quality nonprofit credit counselor. nfcc.org is a good place to turn as a starting point. There are others out there as well, but that's a good place to start. Why did they come up with the new FICO 10? So I talked about that a little bit, Juicy Spirits. It's really part of the regular process. Every few years, they will introduce a revised version of their credit scores. Kind of like, again, I'm kind of a car guy. So when you think about cars, every so often they come out with a new model of car. You have a Ford F-150, and then you have every few years they will have a new body style. And there's different types of cars. Kind of the same thing with scores. They're looking at how people are managing their credit, what things are representing risk, what things maybe aren't anymore as much. How is that information weighed? And so they're studying behavior over time, and then they update their scoring systems. They also look at what kinds of information are available. How is that information relevant, or is it relevant to making decisions? And then how is that incorporated into scores? So with FICO 10T, the trended data version, it's looking at trended data, how you're managing your credit over time, as opposed to just a snapshot of your credit history at one moment. It gives better insight, and they're able to do that now. So that's going to give some better insight into how people manage risk. So it's an update process, so kind of maintaining those scores, making sure they're still reflective of the way people use credit and repay credit, so it predicts risk. So it's just a standard process. That's why we saw FICO 8, we then saw FICO 9, and then we see FICO 10, and it takes a bit of time. Lenders don't just say, oh great, FICO 10's here, we're going to use it now. They have to go to FICO, or FICO goes to them, and they begin to test those scores. So they'll continue to use the scores they have been, that we're all familiar with, and alongside of the new versions, and make sure that they are predictive, that they're consistent, that they still work for them. And over time, they'll adopt them. And that usually takes months, if not, in some cases, years, to see them widely adopted. So I don't think you'll see it right away, despite all of the hoopla in the media lately. I think it's something we'll all become more familiar with and understand better over time. Best starter account for businesses. Yeah, and that's beyond my scope. I really can't speak to specific lenders and others, but the key is to have if you have a small business, make sure it's registered as a business and a legal entity, so usually an LLC, limited liability corporation. And then you have to find a lender who will make a business loan to the business. And so once you have that loan, it will be reported and can be reported to Experian's business credit reporting system, which is kind of like the consumer reporting system, but for businesses. So our business information services group, and you'll then have a credit report. Often, traditional lenders may have business lending units. Talk to them. There are a number of nonprofit business lenders as well out there, and I'm trying to think of a few that I'm drawing a blank today for some reason, but there are really good business lenders that can and some do grants, but they report them as a business loan. So look for those sorts of things as well. What should I do if a delinquent account is more than 7 years on a credit file? If you have an account that's been there for more than 7 years from the original delinquency date, that's kind of the key date. Make sure that it's 7 years from that date. It's not the date that the account was reported on your credit report. It's not the most recent update date. It's not the most recent payment date. It has to be that original delinquency date. I have people say it's been there 7 years, but the account's been there, but it's not the original delinquency date. So check that first. If it's past that 7 years from the original delinquency date, dispute that information. Go to Experian.com/dispute, and you can follow the instructions. We'll give you a free copy of your current credit report if you don't have one already. If your report's older than 60 days, we'll give you a free report so you have a current version. Make sure it's reported accurately. It may not be there anymore if you don't have a current copy. If it is still there, dispute it. All you have to do is click on the button next to the account and dispute and follow the dispute instructions. Really simple to do. It's free, doesn't affect scores. So strongly encourage you to do that. Explain what CPNs are. I heard they're illegal. I think you're saying credit protection numbers, or there's several different phrases. So correct me if I'm wrong. But CPNs, if I understand what you're talking about, there are organizations that will tell you that they're going to create a new identification number for you so that you can create a credit report. And they do that in several ways. They'll either create something that they report as a social security number that has the same format. So however many numbers that is, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9 numbers, right? So it looks like a social and it's a fake number. Or they'll use a stolen social security number that belongs to someone else and tell you to use it. Or they'll use what's called an ITIN, an individual taxpayer identification number, tell you to use that. But these so-called made-up numbers aren't. They may be fraud, especially if they're a stolen social security number. You are using a false identifier to try to create a separate credit report. And so check into the Credit Repair Organizations Act. What I would recommend there. You may find that they're committing fraud, but you're right. The other issue is with CPNs, we will recognize them as an invalid social security number, so they don't really affect your credit history. First thing, so we would know that they're not a legitimate social. The second issue is you don't have to have a social security number to have a credit report. If a lender opens an account in your name, they report that to us with your identifying information, but no social, that's okay. We can create a credit report. Experian will match to all of the identifying information that's reported to us. You'll still have a social security number. You don't have to do something that's a little questionable to try to establish one. If you're trying to use that number, I'm not saying you are, but what the law says and what a lot of the things that I've seen, if you're trying to find a new number to try to escape a poor credit history, that is a violation of the law. So you can't use a false number or false identity to try to escape a bad credit history. That's potentially credit fraud. So it's an issue. So keep those things in mind. The other thing is if you use all of your identifying information, you have a different number that you provide to us, we're just going to add that number to your credit report. So you'll still have the same credit history. It's not going to break you away from that credit history. It's just a new number. We list all variations of identifying information reported to us, including your name, your social security number, street addresses, and so on. So you would see that would just be added to your report. Why do people's credit files still get mixed with others? Mine's 4 times already. Rich 33181. It's actually much more rare than it used to be. It's usually, and when it does happen, it's a father and son with a junior, senior, second, or third relationship. So, not sure what's happened there. If you are having that issue, dispute the information. As always, get your credit report. Go to Experian.com/dispute. We will be able to, for lack of a better term, flag your report to tell us that there's a mixed file issue and dispute it as a mixed file. That may help if you've disputed it some other way. The name, the name's not mine, that sort of thing. Use the term mixed or mixed file. That can help us separate the two, make sure we are recognizing exactly the same problem, and get that resolved. Best I can offer with a little information. It just depends. Is it someone with a similar name, similar address? Is it a father-son relationship? Those sorts of things can make it more difficult. I always, the analogy I use is that George Foreman. I'm a big fan of him as a boxer and as a grill, but the way he named his sons, not so much, because they're all named George Foreman. So that's a challenge from a credit reporting standpoint, because that's what he named. It wasn't second, third, junior, senior. It was George Foreman, and he has 4 or 5 sons, and they lived it presumably. I haven't seen the reports, don't know anything about this specifically. My guess is they lived at the same address at some point. They have similar birth dates or close. They have other identifying information that's very potentially the same. It makes it hard to separate when people have the same names. And you're not the only one with your name. I can almost guarantee you that. I'm not the only Rod Griffin out there. So I had that issue at one point too. Had to explain I was a good credit risk when I was trying to get an apartment years ago, because the other Rod Griffin that was in the same city, not so much. So it was a bit of a challenge. So understand that challenge. I've kind of been there myself. But we're much better at making sure that doesn't happen again. Not sure what's happening in your case. So it sounds kind of unique. Privacy number. Yeah, credit privacy number. Last question. And okay, credit bureau. Yeah. And we don't, and that's a kind of a myth. We don't issue a privacy number for celebrities or, people like the high profile people who might have issues, have need to be have their histories protected. We recognize who they are, and we protect them, but we don't. A credit privacy number is not what we use. So, how's student loan debt looked on credit scores? A random image, another good question, and like any other installment loan. So if you're paying them on time, you're doing well with them, paying them off, it's going to help your credit history over time. If you are not paying them on time, you're becoming delinquent, that's going to hurt your credit history. So just like any other installment loan, essentially. So a situation, Anna McCarthy 1, a situation, a telephone company was reporting an account, and you were outside the country, didn't have an account with them, that they reported it as yours. Account was listed as never had a cell phone account. So that sounds like fraud or identity theft. So I would do 2 things. I would make sure you get a copy of your credit report. Sounds like you may already have done so. Make sure it's current, and then just go to Experian.com/fraud and add an initial security alert to your credit report. It says, I may be a victim of identity theft. Before granting credit, my name, verify my identity, or call me. We'll give you a free report at that point as well. So another free report. Then dispute that account as fraudulent. Make sure you say it's fraudulent or potentially identity theft. You can find that in the drop downs as well. In the process, as you dispute it, but dispute it as fraudulent. That will go a long way toward helping us make sure we're able to dispute it correctly and get the company to respond effectively and in the right way. So, it's not mine, but it's fraud. Not just not mine, but it's fraud. Unless you know who it's from or what the relationship is. But if it's fraud, it's fraud. You should dispute it as fraud. And then if you know that it's fraud, and you find other information in your credit report or from other places, billing statements, things like that you might get in the mail, that let you know you are a victim of identity theft, file a police report with your local police department. You can do that. I did that several years ago when I was a victim of tax fraud, which didn't affect my credit report at all or involve it. So it was kind of interesting. But my little town, they knew how to file a fraud report, an identity theft report. Yours should too. File an identity theft report. You can then upload that and add what we call an extended victim statement to your report. It says, call me before granting credit my name because I'm a victim of identity theft. And we can, at that point, begin to suppress any fraudulent accounts that you report to us. So we can help do that proactively. So kind of steps to follow. Viewed by when having credit report pulled. I missed part of the question maybe. Why did we get missed 4 times? I'm not sure what happened there. Viewed by when having credit report pulled. I'm missing part of the question, N3 WKB there. I'm not sure. Yeah, credit protection number, credit privacy number. We're going to recognize them as not valid numbers in almost every instance. Bianca Domperi Perry 3. I'm sorry, I'm ruining the second half, but thank you for being here. I mean, that's why I'm here, is to answer questions, share information, and my experience to help you. So really helpful. Not similar when you're hit with huge medical bills and unexpected event. I'm missing part of that conversation as I go, but it is challenging, and we are taking steps to change the way we handle and have taken steps in terms of medical debts as well. Is the U.S. the only country that uses FICO scores as a standard way to extend credit? Absolutely not. It's global. FICO is a multinational company. Credit scores are used around the world. Experian has credit reporting businesses around the world. Your credit report never crosses national boundaries. So your U.S. credit report never leaves the United States. If you moved from the United States to England, you would have to start all over again in their credit reporting system at Experian. I always share the story that our CEO has shared. He moved from the UK, from England to the US, runs our business and worked in our business and had to start all over again because his UK credit report did not come with him. So I can tell you unequivocally that that's the fact. You don't have to worry about that, but scoring systems are used around the globe. That's not the only factor, though. That's one of the decision-making components. So a credit score gives insight. It's an important one. It gives insight into how you manage your credit. They look at that credit history as a whole, but they also look at your ability to repay, information that's not in a report, things like income and assets. They look at your previous relationships with the bank, perhaps. They look at other information as well. So it's just a piece of that puzzle and something you have full transparency to. You can get that credit report, information on how to use it, get the risk factors that go with that score, so it's something you can manage. And that's what we want to help you understand and do, is make sure that that credit report is a financial tool, that score is there to work for you, not against you. And because some people feel that way, but it represents risk, the likelihood you'll repay a debt as agreed. You should be able to walk into a lender and know exactly what they're going to see and what to expect and how you can use it to your advantage. So that's why I'm here, is to help you be able to get that information. When lenders pull the credit report, do they see info based on prior FICO systems or revised? It depends on scores they use. A lender specifies what scoring system they want to use. And so that happens in basically 3 ways. One, they can come to Experian, say, I want Rod Griffin's Experian credit report, for example. Experian compiles that report. There are somewhere over 200 scores that what we call reside in our system is a term we use. What that means is FICO and Vantage Score and others rent space in our computer system to store their algorithms, their scoring formulas. Those scoring formulas are proprietary to the developer, so to FICO, to Vantage Score, and to others. So we don't know as a credit bureau what those algorithms are. We route the report into that room that they rent from us. A score is calculated, and the score and the report go together to the lender. That's the first way it happens. And the score is not part of a credit report. That's a common myth. The score is a separate process. It's a tool that's used to evaluate the information in the report, kind of like a grade on a school paper. So separate process to get to the lender, and the lender can tell us when you deliver these two things, show me the identifying information from the credit report first on my screen, for example, and then show me the scores, and then show me the rest of the report. So it looks like the scores, the score looks like the score is part of the report. When in fact, it's not. It's delivered with it. But they can tell us, I want the FICO 9 model, I want a FICO 8 score, I want a Vantage Score 3.0, or I want a Vantage Score 4.0, and that's what we'll send when we deliver the report and the score. That's one way. Another way that scores happen is that the lender will say, I want Rod Griffin's credit report. We send it to them. And then they have their own scoring systems. They have custom scores, and they apply that information, those scores, to their credit report after they get it. So Experian doesn't see that at all. We're not involved in that process. They use their own scores. And the third way is, particularly in mortgage lending, there's something called mortgage reporting companies. So we're asked to send your report when you apply for a mortgage to a mortgage reporting company. They'll get your credit report from Experian as well as the other credit reporting companies, the credit bureaus. They may merge those. They may apply other information, add information from your application, for example, and then they apply a score and they send that information to the lender. So in that case, we wouldn't see it either. So the credit bureau doesn't always have anything to do with the scores. In many cases, automated underwriting, applying for a credit card at the sales counter for instant credit, that sort of thing, you're probably getting a report plus we're routing a report to a scoring system, and they get the two together. But the lender makes that decision. So very commonly misunderstood kind of component to credit reporting. But they decide which scores to use. You mentioned FICO systems are revised ever so often. Yeah, and that's true. So VantageScore is now on version 4.0. They've been around a decade, maybe not even that long. So they're on their fourth version. FICO has multiple versions. They have scores specifically for mortgage lending and for auto lending, so others. And so they update them periodically. If I have a credit card I have not used and they close it, bad for your score. Not necessarily. If you have a credit card, if you haven't been using it, there's no activity. It's probably, depending on how long, if you haven't used a card for, say, 6 months, maybe a bit longer, there's no activity. It may not be included in scores anyway. Scores need to see activity in the account as well as having the account there to use them as part of the calculation. FICO scores typically need somewhere from 3 to 6 months. VantageScore anywhere from a month to 3 months of activity. After that after that account has been reported to Experian as part of your report, they need 3 months. Typically 6 months of activity in order to incorporate that account into the score calculation. So if there's been no activity, they may not be including it in the calculation at all anyway. So once it falls off the report or they close it, pardon me, if the lender says I'm closing the account, the status will be updated to show closed. And that's fine. That's what it is. And so you may see a little change then. Excuse me, I'm trying to lose my voice still. So and right along, but I love all the questions. So yes and no. You'll lose the available credit limit for that account. That can affect your scores a little bit because it can cause your utilization rates to change. So several different factors that get involved. Usually if you close an account, there's never been any late history, your scores will drop a bit initially. After 2 to 3 months, they usually rebound because it's clear you didn't take on debt, and so that's not what caused your utilization rate to change, and your scores rebound. So just give it time. If you're thinking about closing an account, particularly a credit card account, and you're not planning to apply for any new credit in the next 3 to 6 months, maybe a year, probably don't have to worry about it. If you are planning to apply for credit in the next 3 to 6 months, probably better to leave it open until you've completed those transactions. Can't get credit. You're 20 nearly and haven't got anything out on credit. So Big Daddy, thanks for being here. You're young, so patience is the key. In order to have a credit history, you have to have a credit account in your name. So step one, maybe get someone who will add you as an authorized user to their credit account, to a credit card, for example. That can establish a credit history for you. Maybe have someone co-sign for a small loan. Perhaps open a secured account with a credit union or a bank so that you deposit some money in a savings account. They issue you a credit card tied to that savings. And so if you don't pay on time, they can take money out of the savings account to secure them from losses, but they would still report that negative information, that failure to pay. So that could hurt your credit history. So you got to pay it on time. But that would help you get started, and then it's just a matter of time, making sure you're paying those bills consistently and so on. The other thing you can do is if you have a utility account, if you're renting, say an apartment, have them report your positive rent payments to Experian. Once you have an account reported to us, you can have your cell phone bills added, your utility bills added through Experian Boost. Go to Experian.com/boost. and you can tell us which account you pay that utility bill through, the cell phone bill through, and we can add those on-time cell phone payments and utility payments to help boost your credit scores and build your credit history and help speed that process. So a couple of things you can do there. So I hope that helps. And department store cards, pay them off. Then a year later, apply for credit. Yeah, so Ms. DD4, it's the same kind of thing. Get a small account. You don't have to have a big balance. It's not about how large your balance is. It's about how you use the account that's available to you. So if you have a credit card with a $500 credit limit and you make a $10 or $20 purchase each month, pay it in full, show that you're managing it well. They may increase your credit limit over time. It's going to establish that credit history, and it's going to build. Time is kind of the key, so it's patience. And I don't know if it's good to know that your credit starts over if you leave the country or not. Eventually, it will be deleted. So if you're out of the country over time, the information in your credit report does fall off. So if you have an account, have open active accounts, they'll remain indefinitely. If you have closed accounts that are never late, they'll be deleted 10 years from the close date. So eventually they fall off. If you have late payments, they fall off after 7 years, and so on. So eventually, all of the information in your report could go away. But then when you come back to the US, you have to start all over again. So it's a good idea to keep a positive account open so that if you are coming back to the United States, you can rebuild that history over time. An August card. Yeah, time has changed. You might need someone who can add you as an authorized user. And yeah, and I don't think starting over in another country means no credit. Well, when it comes back, it could, and that can be just as bad, if not worse. If you have had issues with credit, you can rehabilitate your credit history. It isn't like a history book. Things happened and they never change. If you've had challenges with your credit, you can rehabilitate that history. Get an account or have an account that you already have, pay down that debt, catch up on those late payments, and start making those payments on time. Eventually, the negative information comes off. The things that are in your scores will fall off. You can regain control and really become in control of that credit history, which is what should happen. And life happens, and businesses, lenders recognize that. It's just a matter of restoring that history over time. So it can be done. Don't give up. And again, go to a good credit counselor if you're trying to rehabilitate. nfcc.org, great place to start. And find a good counselor in your area. They can help you figure out a plan of action to make sure that you can restore that history. I have charges off from 10 years ago. They still charge me for that. So THAMAGU, if you have accounts, a couple of things are occurring to me. If you have accounts that have been charged off as a loss, they're no longer on your credit report. So get a copy of your credit report. Again, you go to annualcreditreport.com, get a free report. You go to Experian.com/dispute. If you feel like you need to dispute, get a free report, dispute that information if it's still there. It may be that information has fallen off of your credit report. If it's no longer in the credit report, it won't come back. But there are laws that govern debt collections. So the Fair Debt Collections Practices Act is the federal one. They may allow collection agencies to attempt to collect the debt even though it's no longer on your credit report. And so keep that in mind. And not into political questions, not a political forum. Can a lender reopen the closed account, or by law they're to close it due to inactivity? So most cases they will close it due to inactivity, potentially, simply because it's costly to them, for one thing, to maintain it, comply with the reporting laws, not credit reporting, but federal banking laws and reporting those accounts and those sorts of things. But they can potentially reopen an account for you at your request, and then could subsequently potentially report as an open active account. But if it's been removed because it's closed, and they're unlikely to open it if it's been that long, and it won't come back unless, I can't think of a reason it would come back, honestly. They have to leave it open or close it up to the lender's discretion. I mean, you can ask that it be closed, and they would close the account too. If you don't pay your credit card bills, they can take money from your savings account to pay the bills. If you have a secured account, that's what a secured account is for. So if you make a charge on a secured credit card, there's a savings account that has money that you deposited in it. And if you fail to pay the bank the for the make your payments that are due on the credit card. You can take the money out of your savings account, but they would still report that late payment to Experian. So if you're managing a secured account well, you're using credit, building your credit history. You're also building savings. So it's a positive in both ways. If you're not, then it's going to create more challenges. So in terms of losing savings and having a delinquent credit history, so make sure you use them well. Tips for building credit for your LLC. Hirschberger 1, same kinds of things. If you have a small business, if you have vendor relationships, if you have a small business loan in the name of the business, and you're making those payments on time, you're paying your vendors well, it will actually help build that history. And the kind of cool thing about business credit reporting is that as a business owner, you can actually share that or have people refer them to get a copy of it to show that you manage your debts well as a business, you're reliable, you've been in business, you don't have any public records, you've not been sued, those sorts of things. So it can be really a great marketing tool as well to help promote your business and show that you're a reliable business. So a couple ways there. And we've run long. Thank you all so much for the fantastic questions. I haven't even told anybody who I am for a long time. I'm Rod Griffin. I'm Director of Consumer Education and Advocacy for Experian. This is Credit Chat. I try to be here Tuesdays and Thursdays, 1:30 Central, 2:30 Eastern, to answer your questions about credit reporting and credit scoring. Usually only 30 minutes, but we've got almost an hour. So really great questions. I love the opportunity to talk and share information that can, I hope, help you in your financial health and help you improve your financial health and use that credit report and score as a financial tool. So thank you all so much for being here. Check us out tomorrow, Wednesday, on Credit Chat on Twitter. We're going to talk about, let me look around my phone and I can tell you how to avoid personal financial disaster. That will be a good conversation, but that's on Twitter. You can learn more about our Twitter chat. So hashtag Credit Chat at ex.pn/Credit Chat. We're on Twitter Wednesdays, 2 o'clock Central, 3 Eastern. I try to be here, as I said, 1:30 Central, 2:30 Eastern on Tuesdays and Thursdays to answer your questions. Really enjoy it. Thank you for all the great dialogue, all of the great information, and for all of the wonderful questions. Hope to see you all very soon. Take care, everybody, and we'll talk on Thursday.